Welcome everybody to today's webinar, What Happens When the Hottest Cloud Storage Meets the Fastest Global Cloud File System. So I am delighted to introduce you to our speakers today. We have Devin Desai, who is an Alliance Manager from Panzura, and David Bolland, who is the Product Marketing Director at Wasabi. We'll do this webinar in two parts. Devin will run through Panzura, and then we'll stop at that point for any questions. We'll be talking about not only Panzura's capabilities, but also cloud mirroring. Then we'll hand over to David to talk through Wasabi. We will take questions in a couple of different places. As you have them, type questions into the chat. We'll stop after Devin's presentation and deal with any then, and then again at the end of the webinar. Devin, I'll hand over to you.
Thank you very much, Petra, and good morning and good afternoon to everybody on the broadcast. Pleasure to be here, and let's go ahead and jump right into it. So if you take a look at the data explosion happening over the last 5 years, or last decade, really, you can see that every time analysts have predicted growth, they pretty much get it wrong, right? So the Forrester Researches, IDCs, and Gartners of the world are always targeting and talking about growth, whether it's in the form of on-premise private infrastructure or cloud infrastructure. It really doesn't matter. A lot of the data explosion, though, is happening in the unstructured data realm. Back in 2020, IDC actually reported that there will be 50 zettabytes of data in 2020. The actual result was 59 zettabytes. So they undershot it by 9 zettabytes. Clearly, there's a lot of unstructured data out there in the marketplace, right? So we know that there's a lot of user-generated data, maybe higher resolution images, social media. We have technologies like IoT devices and drones that are all creating this kind of content, whether it's user-generated or machine-generated. How do we get a grasp on this and start to make our customers' lives easier and do it in an affordable way? But first, we have to understand where the data lives. And when it comes to unstructured data, typically in a customer's data center, it's going to live in a silo, maybe an appliance, something like an EMC or a NetApp array, right? I come from the EMC world, so I can pick on them for a little bit. But typically, those are going to be silos that are deployed in a data center or maybe a remote office or a branch office. Now, there are technologies out there that help the customer with reducing the cost of the amount of storage they have to acquire. So technologies like data deduplication, compression help, but it doesn't really solve the problem of data growth and also globalization, right? We do have a lot of companies and organizations that now have offices all over the world. So that introduces another form of complexity as well. Some of the technologies that people use to help manage this sprawl is consolidating their regions or their offices into centralized locations. So if you take a look at, maybe centralizing a region with one large data center, maybe having users access that data over a virtual private network, that can solve for some problems, but it also introduces others. And namely, that's going to be problems of performance, right? So of course, you can't really get over the problem of physics when it comes to latency and the distance between the customer and where the data lives. There are other technologies out there like WAN accelerators. Maybe the customer can purchase more bandwidth, but again, this introduces more cost, more complexity, and just more management overhead when it comes to centralizing and consolidating by region to make that data available. The other method that we see a lot of customers traditionally deploy is going to be replicating their data from site to site. So if you have a legacy storage product, in order to make that data available for all the teams and people that need to collaborate off that data, you may have to create a complex replication scenario. So you have scenarios like a hub and spoke model as depicted here, or maybe you're doing one-to-many replication in order to make that data available. So this also in turn introduces more cost because the customer is now tasked to purchase more appliances, have more bandwidth connection points at all these different regions or connection points, and they also have to manage the replication jobs. And of course, that data is not real time. It's going to rely on the last scheduled replica in order to get that data from point A to point B and then be able to consume that data. The other issue with this deployment mechanism is that the data is going to sprawl from site to site. So you might have different versions of your data that live in one site and in a secondary site, but the data is not exactly the same, but it might be very similar. So an example of that is a team member A has an original copy of the data, and somebody in a remote site edits that content, has a different version of that. Now they have that PowerPoint file that might look similar, but maybe some text or maybe a few slides are different. So now you have all these copies of data that live in an organization, and then you also have the additional cost and complexity of having to back up all of those different versions at every single one of those sites. So if you think about the costs when it comes to the copies of data that live from replication for all the remote sites, and then the cost of backing up that data and then storing it offsite, begins to add up and introduce a lot of costs and a lot of complexity. So we think there's a better way. This is where Panzura comes in with their global file system. Essentially what we do is we replace your legacy unstructured data filer, like a NetApp, like an EMC isilon array, and we deploy it as a virtual machine. That could live at the edge data center. It can live as a virtual machine on VMware or Hyper-V, or it could even live in the cloud. We're available in all cloud marketplaces, so Azure, Google, and AWS. We can deploy in the cloud and still make that data available anywhere in the world. Now, the crux of this technology relies on a backend S3 compatible object store. In this case, we have an example with Wasabi being the object store on the backend. So as long as a customer has a Panzura filer available at the locations, they are able to access that globally available file or object. So the first thing that we do when we take the customer's unstructured data, we import it into our Panzura file system, or Cloud FS is what we call it. It automatically gets deduped and compressed and also encrypted before it's stored out into the object store. This makes the data secure and makes it globally available. So if a user drops in a project or a file into project one, that data is immediately able to be consumed and edited or picked up at any remote site. So in this case, we have a user in London that wants to access a folder in project 3. They're able to immediately open that file. So we handle all the global file locking semantics because we have a backend mesh that enables all of our Panzura filers to talk to one another. So the secret sauce in our file system is to make that metadata catalog available to every Panzura filer so that all of the updates that happen within the Cloud FS are immediately known and you're able to consume that data. That is why we're able to tout ourselves as the fastest global file system. If you take a look at what the competition is doing compared to how we do it, a lot of the times they're using a centralized lock management inside of the object store. So that creates a large problem because in the competitors' world, they have to rely on their edge filer to check in and check out in time intervals. As that happens in a round robin fashion, their data consistency can only be as good as the last time that their last filer checks into that Cloud FS. Here, we are pushing all of that intelligence out to the Panzura filers, where again, they share a backend mesh and can all communicate with one another. So there's coherency on the caching engine, coherency on the files, and the availability of all that data. So the intelligence, again, in our global file system is immediately available for consumption. Another thing that we do that's unique to our file system is once the data is written into the S3 compatible object store, that data is immutable. So that means that we track all of the changes that happen to that file. And so if you have someone that comes in the London site and appends the PowerPoint file and they edit that, we'll track that change in the form of a snapshot and have a previous version stored in the cloud as well. So we have a DVR-like functionality that tracks all of the changes in the cloud. And again, we make that immutable so it cannot be deleted. Now, what value that brings to your customer is there's inherent protection against malicious acts like malware, viruses, or even worse, if you have a ransomware attack, the customer never has to worry about that because inherently we protect the data against any one of these issues. So if there was a ransomware attack, all you have to do is right click and go to previous version and you'll have your last known good file. You never have to pay a ransom and everybody's happy, right? Sky's blue, rainbows in the sky. You can keep on working. And again, this is a great way to offset expensive backup costs along with all the other additional costs and complexities that we discussed earlier. Now that you understand the immutable data architecture for our global file system, we'll talk about an exciting new feature that we have. It is called cloud mirroring. And so we know today that the cloud is great for scalability and pay as you grow, but it's not always the most resilient thing, right? So if we have this example where a customer has a Panzura filer, let's say they're talking to AWS, AWS has outages. Unfortunately, sometimes they have a region or a zone that may go down, and that can be for a significant amount of time. So with cloud mirroring, we introduced the ability to write data to AWS and to a secondary cloud object store like Wasabi, and we have a split write that happens to two cloud buckets at the same time. Now, what's unique about this is that there's no extra heavy lift from the deployment standpoint, because all we care about on the Panzura side of the house is just a cloud bucket API that we're writing to. And once that token is entered into our software, Panzura will do the rest. It'll write the data in both places. Now, let's talk about a cloud failure. So if you actually had a failure that happened in AWS, all we have to do is simply redirect the reads to Wasabi. And now you as an organization never have to worry about restoring your data from backup, about being down or having lost connectivity to the cloud. We can simply just redirect the reads to Wasabi, and now all your data is available because all of the writes were being mirrored there in the first place. So you might be wondering what failback looks like. So in that case, cloud recovery or failback is as simple as redirecting all the reads back to the original destination. So in this example, AWS comes back online. We have all of the writes that were mirrored at that point in time to Wasabi. What Wasabi will do is automatically understand how long we are out from point A to the failover point, and we would sync all of the writes from the time we were down to the primary cloud, to AWS, the primary source, and now we have a full failback and recovery process without ever having to restore the data. So that is the key to the intelligence in this whole process, is we automate that entire failover and failback process. So it's very clean and it's very elegant and does not require a heavy lift from the IT organization when it comes to restoring user data. So with that, that concludes the Panzura Global File System and the cloud mirroring portion. So if we have any questions over the phone or in the chat, we can maybe pause for that, and I can hand it over to David Boland from Wasabi.
So Devin, we have a question. Is the filer an appliance or an application client?
So the Panzura filer would be considered a virtual appliance that's deployed as a virtual machine. Again, we support a VMware, Hyper-V, or all three major cloud providers. So you can deploy it as a software-defined virtual machine anywhere in your customer data center, on-premise, or in the cloud. So think of us as a true hybrid cloud or multi-cloud, because we are in all three major clouds. You can actually have Panzura in every single one of the clouds and still be able to access all of your data. As a matter of fact, a lot of our enterprise customers are doing that today.
Okay, next question. Do you need to mirror your entire data set from your primary cloud to the secondary cloud?
Today at version 1, yes. And the answer is yes. We are doing a full split write for all of the data. We possibly do have that as a roadmap item, that we can do a subset of the data by file share or by work group. That is being worked on, but at version 1, initial release, it'll be everything on day 1.
Got it. Okay, we have another question from Jacob. How does Panzura handle file locking so that collisions aren't incurred by multiple sites accessing the same files or data at the same time?
Great question. So file locking is all handled at the Panzura virtual machine side of the house. So in this example, if we have a user that has a file open in New York, the file locking is all handled by our Panzura filers. So if a user in London wants to come in and open that same file, the first thing it'll ask is the Cloud FS, is that file available? And the metadata has been updated inside the cloud. So the filer would automatically know that the file lock is being handled through this backend mesh has been opened by a user in New York. So the action that happens in London is the user will get prompted to just open a read-only copy of that. Or if it is in fact a file that supports byte range locking like Microsoft Office or like Revit 3D, those applications actually support dual writes happening across multiple users to collaborate off the same file. So if the application supports rather byte range locking, you can actually have simultaneous access to that same file. But normally the file locks are all handled through metadata access, catalog, and on the Panzura filer. That's part of the magic. That's where we have the intelligence through the backend mesh that all filers are communicating, so there's no write collisions happening because the file locks are being handled through that metadata catalog. Hope that answers your question.
Okay, and next one. When you have cloud mirroring enabled, how quickly does a failover happen, and is it automatic?
Cloud mirroring is automatic. As far as how quickly does it happen, I don't have those exact details. I would say stay tuned for our release notes on that. I would anticipate there being a timeout value that's in our code. I can't answer that right now because it's not officially released. So I do apologize, but if we have your contact information, we'll be more than happy to follow up with you with that question.
Perfect. It looks like that's the end of our questions. So,
Yep.
David, I will switch over to you.
Thank you very much. And thanks, Devin. Thank you guys for inviting us here today. I'm a big fan of Panzura. I know I've got plenty of customers that love Panzura, and I want to spread the word on why Panzura and Wasabi are better together. I've got a few slides, maybe about 10, 15, maybe 20 minutes worth of material to share with you. It's going to be kind of a lot. And of course, it's cloud storage, so it's not all that super exciting, but hopefully I'll give you an idea of who Wasabi is and why we think we are the best cloud repository for your Panzura files. And if by the end of the presentation, you can walk away with 3 things to remember about Wasabi is first, I want you to know that we're easy to understand and use. Cloud object storage doesn't need to be difficult, and we've built a cloud storage architecture that's pretty easy for most people to use. Secondly, the average Panzura user can save 75% and more on their cloud spend with Wasabi versus AWS and Azure Blob. We're just a much less expensive option with far fewer hidden costs. I'll talk about that in a moment. And you know what? The Panzura is the fastest global file system in the world, so it probably wants a fast, high-performance AWS S3 object storage as the back end, and Wasabi's got better performance. So we'll talk about those 3 things, and that's what I want you to walk away with. So first question I have to answer for most of you folks on the line is, who the hell is Wasabi and why should you care, right? Great question. So we are the fastest growing cloud storage service today. We launched our service in 2017. AWS, Azure, and Google have been out for 10 years, 15 years in the case of AWS. We started designing our service in 2015, and we went live in 2017. Our founders and some of our senior engineers came from Carbonite. Carbonite, backup cloud company. Most people are familiar with Carbonite. We had some inside knowledge as to how to build a cloud storage service. And about 2015, when we decided to spin out and do our own thing, there were a lot of advanced technologies that were available in the market. They were available in the market in 2015, 2016, 2017 that weren't available in 2005, 2006 when AWS was designed. And so therefore we were able to take advantage of latest technologies and hardware and software to bring to market a less expensive, faster solution and easier to use than AWS and Azure. So that's it. Our competition is S3, it's Azure Blob, it's IBM Object Storage, and Google Cloud. If it's object and it's in the cloud, it's a competitor for us, and we go after that market pretty aggressively. It was exactly 4 years ago today, which we launched our service. May 4th, 2017 is when we launched the service. And by the end of 2017, we had 1,000 customers, right? 2018, we had about 3,000 customers. The end of 2020, we were at 23,000 customers. And right now in May 2021, we're at 25,000 customers. We, like I said, are fastest growing cloud storage company out there. We have a wide range of end users and just a growing global footprint. Right now, Oregon, 2 data centers in Virginia. We've got Dallas, Amsterdam, and Tokyo. We have plans for at least 3 more by the end of the year going global. So if we don't have a data center close to you yet, odds are we're going to get one real soon. Things are just going well for us on the growth side, revenue side, and the customer side. And a lot of that is because, as I mentioned, we're a different kind of cloud storage company. We focus on making it simple and easy to use. Shouldn't have to go to cloud school for 3 months in order to get a cloud certificate that says that you're now cloud aware. We have a focus on channel partners. So if you are an end user and you're used to purchasing through a channel partner, well, we'll work with them. If you are a VAR ISP, VAR MSP, or a systems integrator, we'll work with you too. We have a focus on channel in Asia, in Europe. 100% of our business goes to the channel. In North America right now, it's close to 50-50, but we're growing that channel. So if you are an MSP, a system integrator, or a VAR, and you want to be able to sell cloud storage to your customer, and you felt like you've been cut out of the cloud storage business from AWS, Azure, and Google, Wasabi is a great opportunity for you. And of course, our Technology Alliance Partner Program, that's critically important to us. We are cloud storage. That's all we do. We're not going to build a cloud file system like Panzura. We don't want to compete with these guys. These guys are the best at what they do. Why would we want to do that, right? So you're not going to see us going after a cloud file system that's a global file system like Panzura. We're not going to build a backup software, or archive software, or video management software, or any asset management software. We're storage. That's what we are. That's what we do. Therefore, we work with the people that are the best. We want to work with Panzura. We want to work with Veeam and Rubrik and Commvault. We want to work with the technology folks that have the applications that the end users use and build a solution for our channel partners and ultimately for our customers. So that's it. Easy to use, easy to understand. Focus on channel partners, and our Technology Alliance partnership is critical for us, because if it wasn't for folks like Panzura, we wouldn't have customers moving their data or files to the cloud. Now, what makes us different than the other clouds? First off, we'll start with cost. Totally simple. On average, $5.99 per terabyte per month. That's all it is. There's one tier. You don't have to worry about having a hot tier, warm tier, cold tier, or wicked cold tier, or glacier, or deep glacier, or anything else. It's one tier. All of our data is treated as hot. It's milliseconds away, as fast as your application can ask for it, or you can click that mouse button, you get your data back. You don't have to wait for possibly hours for your data to come back off of an archive tier. We've got archive pricing, but hot cloud storage performance. Another thing I'll talk about more in a moment is hidden costs. We don't have any API request charges. So if you want to put your data up, you want to do an API get, you want to do a put, a get, an inventory list, or any other kind of API requests, you're going to get charged for them by the larger cloud providers. We don't do that. We don't at all. So you can make as many API requests as you want. You're not going to get charged for it. And like I said, there's no complex tier. So our architecture, our pricing program is quite a bit different. And that's because, as I mentioned earlier, we came to market later than anybody else. Right? When 2006, when you were going to build a cloud storage architecture, it made sense because of the costs of compute and the cost of network and the cost of transport and the cost of everything else that you would build a multi-tiered architecture. A hell of a lot's changed since 2006. And if you're going to build a cloud storage architecture today, you certainly wouldn't make it like AWS, S3, or Azure, or Google have. Those tiers are confusing. You don't really know which tier you're data is best served on, and there are hidden costs, and it makes your bill impossible to predict. If you don't know what your charges are going to be for egress each month, or the number of changed files you have, or just data retrieval, you can't predict your bill. And I know I can't go to my boss and say, hey, I'm going to sign up for this, boss, but I'm not exactly sure what the bill is going to be every month. He'd look at me like that's crazy. So no, there's no hidden costs, and Wasabi bills are totally predictable to understand. As I mentioned, there's no hidden costs, and there's a ton of hidden costs in the different cloud services if you look deep enough to find them, right? As I mentioned, you got your API puts and gets and inventory operations. If you want to do an on-net transfer from one region to another region, if you want to go from AWS East region to West region, they're going to charge you for moving that data across their network, 2 cents a gigabyte, right? You want a retrieval fee. Some tiers have a retrieval fee, some don't have a retrieval fee. If you're on infrequent access, you're going to pay a couple cents a gigabyte in order to get your data back, or at least 1 cent a gigabyte to get your data back. And that's different from your egress charges. You get egress charges, just the network charges of getting that data back. And that's not how it should be. In case of Panzura, you don't need to worry about object overhead charges, because it doesn't make sense to put your files in a Glacier or Deep Archive. If you were to put files in the Glacier Deep Archive, not only would it take you a long time to get them back, but AWS also puts a little overhead on them and charges you for the overhead that they use to find your data when you ask for it. Small object tax, don't need to worry about that unless you have files that are under 128K in a couple different tiers. The nice thing about Panzura is that it's got a high performance architecture that has the 128 KB blocks that are combined into drive files, which can be anywhere from 1 megabit to 32 megabits. So you don't have to worry about small object tax in the case of Panzura. But if you're using the cloud for anything else, yeah, you'd want to make sure you knew exactly what size objects you were putting up in the cloud. What happens, though, is that you get different charges and you get expensive bills and you get all kinds of things going on if you don't put your data in the right cloud. And if you do just a quick Google search on cloud horror stories, you're going to find 15 years of articles about people who got burned because they put their data in the wrong tier, or they egress too much, or they didn't use a backup, but they put their primary data up there. And when they needed to get their data back, they had all kinds of charges associated with it. Most of the time, people underestimate their cloud budget. There's all kinds of great reports out there from folks like Gartner or 451 or IDC that talk about hidden costs or just proper budgeting of cloud spend. And if you don't know what those hidden charges are, you can't budget for it. And so that in that case, AWS, Azure, and Google is not your friend because of the hidden charges. Again, Wasabi, just one straight flat price, $5.99 a terabyte per month. That's $599 a month for 100 terabytes. Now, I know everybody here is familiar with Azure and AWS and Wasabi, right? And you got an idea of the different tiers. And they do have less expensive tiers, right? It's not just the $23 a terabyte a month in AWS S3 or hot LRS at $18 a terabyte per month. They've got cool LRS and if you're going to access one zone, it drops your prices nicely. And in that case, you're looking at $1,000 a month for 100 terabytes of cloud storage, which isn't bad, right? Wasabi at $599 a month is $400 difference from the lowest AWS and Azure tiers, right? And so you could say to yourself, hey, you know what? For $400 a month, maybe I'll go with AWS and Azure on these lower, cooler tiers and not have to worry about putting it in Wasabi. It's maybe somebody I'm not familiar with because they're a new company and I'm not sure if I'm really to trust my data with a new company. That's cool. I understand that. But the cool LRS and one zone, although they're less expensive than the hotter tiers, they also have more hidden charges with them, right? So simply put, if you were just to put straight up storage into Wasabi for $599 a month for 100 terabytes and use that one zone or infrequent access, they're not that far off. But you know what? You say to yourself, hey, on average, maybe I egress 10%. Now, everybody has different egress. It could be I average 10% egress per month, or it could be I average 10% egress per year. There'll be a big difference. So you'd have to have an idea of what is right for you. But if you start with the raw storage cost, you get a close, right? You get close. But again, too, you also have a put cost. And as mentioned earlier, what's awesome about Panzura is because they have block sizes. Right? So you start with the 120 KB block size, which is awesome again because it increases the performance. And that's why Panzura has a fantastic solution as far as speed and performance goes. Panzura then combines these 128K blocks into drive files, which could be anywhere from 1 megabyte to 32 megabyte. So if you are, saying, hey, that's it, I'm going to AWS no matter what, make that a big file, make that a 32 megabit file because you'll have less charges on a per object basis because you get charged by per object in this case. But for the majority of use cases that we see at Wasabi and the friends of mine that use Panzura, it's about a 4 megabit file size is on average what we see. Varies between 3 megabit and 5 megabit, 4 sitting between 3 and 5 pretty easily. So I used 4 megabit block sizes for this cost calculation. And in this case, with 100 terabytes of Panzura file storage in the cloud, and you're using a 4 megabit block size, that's about 250,000 files per terabyte, about 25 million drive files for the customer. So now we're talking about millions of files. And if you put those millions of files into AWS S3, you're looking at an API put cost just to put your data in there of $250 on infrequent access or infrequent access one zone. S3 is a little bit less expensive because the storage charges have been a little bit higher. So you end up paying $125 just to put your data up there. Now, again, you say, I want to retrieve about 10% of that. Well, what's my data retrieval cost? Your data retrieval cost is about 1 cent a gigabyte. And if you're going to retrieve 10 terabytes out of your 100 terabyte cloud storage, well, then you're looking at about $100 just for data, just for the act of asking for that data back. That's your data retrieval request. Right? Then on top of that, you've got an API get cost. And in most cases, these things are onesies, twosies. It's going to be $40 here, $15 here. You don't really know what your API get costs are going to be, but they're going to be so low that you're not really going to get bummed out by it because it's not that expensive. But again, they're nickel and diming you. If you take all the get costs that you have and multiply that by the other thousands of customers they have, it's money in their pocket. So the API get costs tend to be a little bit more annoying than anything else. But where they really start to get you are the egress costs. All right, so that's where you get hit hard. Now, there's two types of egress out of Azure and Google AWS. There's your direct connect charge in the case of AWS. Your direct connect is, you say you got a 1 gig pipe. That's, you use a direct connect to them, you'll probably end up paying 2 cents a gigabyte. If you don't use a direct connect to AWS, then you pay 9 cents a gigabyte for your egress. And if you're egressing data or egressing files on a regular basis, it's going to add up. On top of all the storage costs, you have your additional hidden costs. And with Wasabi, you don't. So that's it. You have 75% savings with Wasabi, more depending on which tier you use. Now, I said that, you've got the world's fastest global file system, and Panzura should have the world's fastest hot cloud storage, which is Wasabi. We've got a distributed architecture that we've put in our data centers. It has multiple different server types. There's a user server, there's a database server, there's a storage server. They all tied together with fat pipes and load balancers, and it's designed for high performance. We have a performance paper on our website that'll share with you the performance comparisons to AWS. And depending on the number of threads you use and the size of the objects, you'll see different performances. But on average, it's anywhere between 1.5 times faster to 6 times faster on the 40 tests that we run on occasion against AWS. So again, performance is important, cost is important, and so therefore Wasabi is a great place to use as your backend for your Panzura site. One of the cool things I like about Panzura, and I liked about them before I came to Wasabi, was that they're agnostic about where the storage goes. Right? It could go on Azure, AWS, IBM Cloud, Google, on Dell ECS or NetApp Storage Grid. It could go on Clouding or Scality. The cool thing about Panzura, if you're a customer, if you're in the channel, you've got options. And so it's not Devin's job to tell you which is the best object storage for you. It's my job to help you better understand why I think that Wasabi is the best place for your Panzura backend. And when we get to the end of this, I'll wrap it up with the 3 things I want you to remember. But performance, cost are totally important. Now, we talked about immutability and, of course, cloud mirroring. Why would you cloud mirror in the first place? Because you need to have a reliable second cloud for your storage. And they've got immutability, which is fantastic, which is critically important. And so does Wasabi. Durability and availability are critical. From a data durability perspective, we're talking 11 nines of data durability with Wasabi. It's the same durability that you get with the S3. That means if you store 10 million objects for 10,000 years, we might lose 1 object. The durability is there. And we do an integrity check of all the data every 90 days. So you don't have to worry about bit rot or anything else. We just do integrity checks at the time of upload, download, and every 90 days. 99.99% availability with multiple data centers. That's it. You get 4 nines of availability in tier 1 clouds. AWS, Azure, Google, 4 nines of availability. Wasabi, 4 nines of availability. From a compliance perspective, yep, HIPAA compliant, CGIS, FERPA, FINRA, GDPR. If you have compliance requirements for your data, we've got them. So let your channel partner sales guys know, or if you don't have a channel partner sales, or you are a channel partner and you want to talk to Wasabi, ask our sales guys for our compliance information. Totally fine. We'll share everything we've got with you. All of our data is kept SOC 2, Type 2 certified data centers with redundant power, redundant everything coming in and out, redundant racks, 96 hours of battery backup. Our data center in Texas was up and running through the whole storm earlier this year. Didn't even have a hiccup. ISO 27001 compliant, everything you need to worry about in the cloud, Wasabi will take care of for you. So feel free to ask your channel partner or Wasabi folks about our security and our reliability as well. Immutability, absolutely not an issue. One of the things I love about Panzura is their immutability story. If you want to put that data in an immutable bucket in Wasabi, we'll do it for you as well. So anything that goes into that bucket not only can't be deleted or changed by anybody, it can't be encrypted by ransomware. So someone can't go in and encrypt that bucket and then say, hey, we got your bucket. You want these encryption keys back, you got to pay us. So it's all good and it's all there and it's all immutable. Let's talk about where you could learn more about Wasabi and Panzura. If you want to go to the Wasabi website, wasabi.com, we have knowledge base articles in our resource section at the top of the page. Click on the knowledge base, open it up, you put Panzura in the search bar. It'll come back with everything you need to know about how to use Panzura with Wasabi. You want to share some information with friends and family around the dinner table tonight about Wasabi and the Panzura solution? Totally fine. You can download the solution brief from wasabi.com. And if you say to yourself, okay, I don't need to worry about the solution briefs or how to use Panzura, I just want to go straight to using it, and we can give you a 30-day free trial at wasabi.com. You just go up, you sign it, you put your name and address, you put email address. You don't put a credit card in. We don't care about the credit card. So we're not going to automatically charge anybody for anything. You're not automatically enrolled. Run that 30-day trial. Find out if it's something you like. If you do, awesome, sign up for it. If it's not, maybe come back some other time when you're ready for it. So free trials, knowledge-based articles, and the solution briefs all available on our website. Again, just to wrap it up, I started off the conversation with the 3 things I wanted you to remember about Wasabi, if you could take away anything from today, and that would be it's easy to use and understand. We've got the knowledge base article that tells you how to use Wasabi Panzura. We pretty much walk you through every step you need to do to configure Wasabi as the backend for Panzura. We're going to save the average Panzura user about 75% on their cost savings over AWS and Azure and other clouds. We don't have the hidden charges that most other clouds do, so you don't have to worry about that. And our performance matches the fastest global file system out there. So you've got the fast global file system, you might as well have a hot cloud storage. And with that, I'm going to wrap it up and say, again, thank you for spending your time with us today. I appreciate it. I love Devin's presentation. I learned a lot. And if you have any questions, feel free to jump in now and ask, or hit us up on the website, sales@wasabi.com, or send me an email at dboland@wasabi.com. With that, Petra, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Thank you very much. And we do have a couple of questions. First one, what is the process and the price if you want to move your data from AWS to Wasabi?
Oh, okay. Great question. If you're going to move from AWS to Wasabi, you're going to have to pay Andy Jassy and Jeff Bezos their tax on egressing their cloud. It's either, depending on your connection to AWS, it's either going to be 2 cents a gigabyte or 9 cents a gigabyte, depending on how you egress it. Now, there are companies out there that allow you to move your data from AWS to Wasabi using their application. Let's say you've got a couple 100 terabytes and you've got millions of objects and you don't have the time or the on-prem storage to reseed that into the cloud, then someone like Assembly, ACEMBLY, is a cool cloud-to-cloud migration tool. They'd be all right, but you're going to pay an egress charge coming out. You just want to minimize that as much as possible. If it's backup data and you can do your next full backup to Wasabi and just let that backup data in Azure or AWS atrophy and slowly go away over time, that might be a good option for you as well. You're not going to end up spending more money. And then I'd have to work with Devin at Panzura to figure out what the best way is if someone wanted to change their backend from AWS to Wasabi. I know that it's been done before, but there's some details in there I don't know off the top of my head. So reach out to me or Devin or your friendly Panzura guy, and we can help you if it is Panzura data. Let us know.
Perfect. Okay, Devin, the next one's for you. When will Cloud Mirroring be available to existing customers, and how hard will it be to enable it?
So we're targeting by the end of the year. Hopefully, it's going to be the next 60 days for the release. We have slowly released a bunch of hot fixes to our current code. As a matter of fact, one just went out today to get ready for the big release. So Petra, if you can get this gentleman's or lady's information, I'll be more than happy to follow up with the exact date for that release.
Certainly can. And how do people go about enabling Cloud Mirroring when it is available?
It will be inherently part of our software stack. It's going to be built in our code. Again, it is a split write capability. So as far as all we care about is going to be the additional object storage target. In this case, if it's Wasabi, we would need the API key and the token to be able to put in our filer software. It's as simple as that. And from there, we can do split writes right through the filer itself. So we do have one other consideration, which is a global HA. If you do have a high availability Panzura deployed anywhere in the cloud or another data center, we do have to take that into consideration with a failover filer, if that's part of the solution. And so there's a different best practice around that. So we do have to kind of maybe look at the deployment to see which way you're going to deploy it with a global HA without, and then we can get into the nuances of how that's actually going to get set up.
Lovely. Okay, next one. Are Panzura support staff ready to help make Wasabi an option? So Joe says in the past he's asked about using Wasabi with Panzura filers, but it wasn't recommended at that point.
Yeah, I'm not sure how long ago that was, but yeah, absolutely. We definitely do support them now. We are supporting new object stores almost on a monthly basis. I know for a fact we're actually testing other object storage as providers as we speak. Just on our last major release, or I should say our major release, but our last release, we introduced Nutanix objects and MinIO open source object storage as 2 object stores under our certification matrix. We absolutely do support Wasabi. We have no issues with that.
Perfect. Next question. If I set up Wasabi as my mirror cloud storage and it works well, can I make it my primary later?
Later is the key operating word there. So initially, we are not using it as a migration tool. Our product group has been pretty explicit around stating that. They're investigating using it as a migration tool, but the expectation is day one that there's always going to be a failback to the original object store. And so to answer that question, it will be, but not on day one, right? That's a roadmap item.
Excellent. Okay, it does look like that was the last question. So everybody, thank you very much for spending some time with us today. If you have any further questions, please feel free to contact us. We have recorded this webinar. We'll send out a link to the recording, and you can simply hit reply to that email and we'll get you all the answers you need. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Thanks, everybody.